You can always feel the wound before you see the apology. It shows up in the way they pull back after a fight. The way they act as though nothing happened, as if the silence itself is their version of moving on. You can feel it in the absence of acknowledgement, like you're meant to swallow your own pain, because naming it would be too much for them. An avoidant can hurt you and somehow make you feel like you're the one who's asking for too much. That's their quiet superpower. Not because they're evil, but because somewhere along the way, they learned that responsibility feels like danger. Owning their impact means standing in the middle of emotions they've spent a lifetime outrunning. So instead, they hide behind a mask of indifference. They'll make coffee in the morning like nothing's wrong. They'll send that "what's up" text 2 days later without a single word about what they did. And a part of you will want to take it, to let it go, just to have the connection back. But here's the truth you've probably felt in your bones. The moment you accept their return without their repair, you teach them they don't have to face the wreckage they leave behind, and an avoidant will keep walking through that open door until one day you quietly close it. Getting an avoidant to apologize isn't about begging for acknowledgement, crafting the perfect speech, or waiting for some magical moment when they're suddenly emotionally fluent. It's about changing the one thing they didn't expect you to change: your position in the dynamic. Because apologies, real apologies, don't come from guilt-tripping or ultimatums. They come when the balance of power shifts, when the person who's always been available suddenly isn't, when the source of their quiet control, your willingness to absorb the pain in exchange for proximity, is gone. What if the fastest way to an apology isn't asking for one, but creating a space they can only enter by bringing it? What if the moment you stop filling the silence, they're forced to feel what's inside it? The truth is, an avoidance apology is rare, but not impossible, and the way to it isn't what most people think. It's subtle. It's counterintuitive. And once you understand it, you won't just get the apology, you'll get something far more valuable: proof that you're no longer the one who carries the weight alone. The first thing you have to understand is this: avoidants don't respond to emotional arguments. They respond to shifts in emotional availability. When you're hurt, the instinct is to explain, to lay out the facts, the feelings, the sequence of events, so they can see it from your side. You think, if they just understood how much this affected me, they'd say sorry. But here's the thing: an avoidance nervous system isn't wired to hear you in that moment. When you come toward them with intensity, they feel the heat rise in the room, even if you're calm, and instead of listening, they instinctively start looking for the exit. They've been practicing that escape route since childhood. Maybe it was the slam door of a parent. Maybe it was ridicule when they cried. Maybe it was the quiet message that their feelings didn't matter. And so when you bring yours, they feel cornered, not because your feelings are wrong, but because vulnerability has always been dangerous terrain for them. So they do what they've always done. They shut down, they deflect, they change the subject, they turn it into a joke, and you're left standing there, bleeding from a wound they pretend doesn't exist. Here's the counterintuitive truth: the more you push for acknowledgement in that moment, the more you feed the very reflex you're trying to break. You give them something to run from, and an avoidant will always run from what feels like pursuit. The shift is to stop making the apology the condition for reconnection. Instead, you make your peace of mind the condition. That means you take a step back, not in a dramatic "fine, I'm done" way, but in a grounded, self-contained way that signals, I am no longer available for this kind of exchange. It's subtle, but they feel it instantly. It's in your tone, your pace, your absence from the usual places they find you. It's not punishment, it's recalibration. And when you do this without anger, without the energy of chasing, something unnerving happens for them. They notice the space. They notice you're not leaning in. And because avoidants are far more attuned to loss than they are to love, they begin to register the risk. And that's the seed of the apology. Not guilt, not pressure, but the sudden awareness that access to you is no longer unconditional. Most people experience silence from an avoidant as punishment, as proof they don't care, as the final stamp on the idea that you don't matter to them. And when you're sitting in that silence, every minute can feel like confirmation that you've been abandoned. That's when the spiral starts. The overthinking, the mental replay of what you said, the temptation to break the stillness just to feel something again. But here's the truth you were never told. Silence is not neutral. It is a space that you can control if you know how to hold it. The avoidant uses silence to regulate themselves, but they're also used to it being a weapon that works in their favor. They expect you to break first. They expect the discomfort to push you back into their orbit, to chase the connection they've just withdrawn. And every time that happens, the pattern reinforces itself. You feel the absence, they feel the power. The shift is to stop letting silence be their territory alone. You step into it like it belongs to you. You make it work for you by staying present in your life without using them as the emotional center of it. You stop pacing by your phone. You stop crafting speeches in your head. You stop making their attention the weather you live under. When you do this, something unfamiliar begins to happen for them. Avoidants are incredibly sensitive to changes in relational energy, even if they pretend not to notice. When you don't fill the silence for them, it creates a kind of static they can't tune out. They wonder why you haven't reached for them. They start to notice the absence of your presence, your warmth, your investment. And here's the part that makes it so powerful. You don't have to announce anything. You don't send a cryptic message. You don't post a pointed quote on social media. You let the gap speak for itself, because the absence of your pursuit is the loudest signal you can send. An avoidant may not articulate this shift in words, but internally the ground has moved. And the longer you hold that ground, calm, centered, without playing games, the more likely it is they'll return not with defensiveness, but with the beginnings of acknowledgement. If this is landing for you, subscribe. We're just getting started. The third shift is about the moment they come back, that fragile, slippery point where most people either hand their power away or shut the door so hard they miss the very thing they wanted, true accountability. When an avoidant returns, it rarely starts with an obvious apology. They test the waters first. A casual message, a random comment, something that seems harmless but is actually a probe. Is the door still open? Will you welcome me back without making me face what I did? This is where most people get swept away. The rush of relief that they've resurfaced, the hope that maybe this time it will be different, the craving to feel that connection again, it can all blur your vision. And if you respond with too much warmth too quickly, you've just taught them they can avoid discomfort forever and still get access to you. That is the opposite of an apology. That is the opposite of change. So you do something different. You meet their return with grounded openness. Not cold walls, but not unguarded welcome either. You let them feel that the door is not locked, but it is not swinging wide on its hinges anymore. You respond calmly in a way that communicates, I am here, but this conversation has a cost. This is where your power lives. In the pause. You're not rushing to prove you're okay. You're not filling the space with reassurance. You let them feel the weight of the gap between their actions and the closeness they want. That discomfort is not cruelty. It is the bridge to their accountability. And when they sense they can't just bypass the past, that's when the real conversation can happen. You can express what you experienced without collapsing into blame or begging. You speak from clarity, not from a wound that's still bleeding. You name the behavior, you share the impact, and you hold your standard in place. This is not about punishing them. It's about creating the only environment in which an avoidant will choose to step into the vulnerability of an apology. Because here's the truth, Avoidants are not wired to hand over power, but when you stand in your own without threat or desperation, they feel something they can't feel in the cycles they're used to: safety and accountability. And when they feel that, the words you thought you'd never hear can finally surface. The fourth shift is where everything gets tested, because an apology from an avoidant isn't automatically a sign of change. Sometimes it's a peace offering meant to reset the connection without actually addressing the roots of the hurt. Sometimes it's a survival move, a way to soothe your anger just enough so things feel safe again for them. And sometimes it's real. But the difference between those three is subtle, and this is where most people get it wrong. A genuine apology from an avoidant won't just be about their words. It will be about their willingness to linger in the discomfort of your truth without shutting down, without minimizing, without making it about their own pain. It's when they can hear you say, "When you disappeared, I felt abandoned. It left me questioning my worth." And instead of explaining or deflecting, they stay, they breathe, they let it in. That moment, their capacity to hold space, is the truest apology you will ever receive from them. And here's the paradox. If you rush to forgive too quickly, if you smooth over their discomfort, you strip them of the chance to grow into that moment. The lesson dissolves before it's even landed. So you slow it down. You let their apology sit in the air, not as a transaction that instantly resets the relationship, but as the opening move in a deeper repair process. You watch what follows. Do they make consistent choices that reflect what they've just said? Do they approach you with more transparency, more availability, more willingness to be in the mess with you? Because without that behavioral follow-through, their apology is just emotional currency they spent to buy their way back in. And if you've been through this cycle before, you know how expensive that false comfort becomes. When you're rooted in your own power, you're not afraid to say, "Thank you for saying that, and I need to see it in your actions." That's not a threat. That's an invitation to rise, one they're free to accept or reject. But by holding that line, you're telling them this connection is only sustainable if it lives in truth, not in performances of remorse. And here's the unexpected gift. When they realize you won't rescue them from the work of making things right, they have to choose. That choice is what separates the avoidant who's capable of real change from the one who's only capable of circling back. Send this to someone who's been stuck in this dynamic for far too long. The fifth shift is about power, not the loud, dominating kind, but the quiet, immovable kind that changes the entire emotional temperature of the relationship. See, an avoidant can apologize. They can even start showing small shifts in behavior. But here's the real test. Can you stay in your power once they're back in your orbit? Can you hold on to the boundaries and self-respect that made them come back in the first place? Most people don't. They breathe a sigh of relief, feel the connection flowing again, and unconsciously slide back into old patterns, over-giving, over-explaining, anticipating their moods, making them comfortable at the expense of their own needs. And that is exactly when the avoidant's old wiring kicks back in. The space starts to widen again. The chase is gone. The magnetism fades. The shift here is refusing to collapse. You don't let their return lull you into abandoning yourself. Instead, you double down on what anchored you before: your independence, your clarity, your ability to stay grounded in your own life. You stay connected, yes, but you don't overcompensate for their comfort. You let them meet you where you are. This creates a very specific emotional climate for the avoidant. They feel wanted, but they also feel the constant quiet pressure of your standard. They can't drift too far without noticing the gap. Because you're not chasing to close it, they're the ones who have to decide whether they value the connection enough to maintain it. And here's the thing. Avoidants don't change because you convince them to. They change because the reality of losing you becomes more uncomfortable than the work of staying close. Your job isn't to threaten that loss, but to live in a way that makes it clear you'll never be held hostage by their inconsistency again. That's what makes the apology mean something. It's no longer a sweet moment you replay in your mind. It's the first brick in a structure they have to help build if they want a life with you. If they falter, the connection doesn't crumble. You simply keep walking your path, and that quiet certainty, it's magnetic in a way they can't ignore. The final shift is the one most people never reach, because it requires you to step so fully into your own life that the outcome with them is no longer the axis your world spins on. This is where you stop tracking their progress like an emotional stock market. You stop needing to catch the apology or secure the change. You live in a way that is already whole. And ironically, it's this state where you've truly released the expectation that often pulls the most sincere transformation from an avoidant. Because here's the truth. Avoidance can feel the difference between your quiet strength and your silent hope. Silent hope still has a tether. It's waiting, it's watching, it's secretly timing how long it will take before they notice you again. But quiet strength, that's when you're not watching at all. That's when you're actually busy living, loving, and creating without their behavior dictating your joy. If they come back here, it's not because you left the door cracked open. It's because they found themselves standing outside it, realizing they have to knock this time. They have to earn their place. And if they don't, you don't collapse. You don't spin into what ifs. You simply keep walking the path you've already claimed as yours. This is what staying in your power really means. You are no longer in a relationship dynamic with them or with the idea of them that requires you to lose yourself to keep love. The apology, when it comes, is just confirmation of what you already know, that you are always worth respect, honesty, and repair. And from here, the choice is clear. Not because they finally see it, but because you've been living it. And whether they rise to meet that standard or not, you're already free. If this has landed for you and you're ready to keep breaking out of these cycles, subscribe. This isn't about chasing apologies or managing someone's fear of intimacy. It's about reclaiming the kind of love where you never have to question your worth again, and you deserve nothing less.